So I found this truck, and the reason it was cheaper because it had high engine hours on it. Now normally, like, you look at 7,639 idle hours and you go, oh, that's a lot. You know, that's a lot. You know, and it really is. So that amount of hours is like idling the truck 10 hours a day for 2 years straight every day, or the truck idling straight all year long for 1 year. So that's a lot of hours on the engine already. So I did some searching around and I did some research, and I was trying to figure out how would a truck get 7,000 idle hours on it. You know, because that's like having a truck with 400,000 K on it already. So if you use the Ford method of calculating idle hours to mileage, like if you're driving down the road, Ford says for every hour that is equivalent to 33 miles driven. So I got 7,639 idle hours. So 33 times 7,639. So that's 252,087 miles. That's a lot, or that's you know, equivalent to you know, times 2.2 for kilometers. That's 591,000 kilometers. So that's a lot. That's a lot of time on the engine. So hang on here. So I got 223,000 kilometers on there. So plus 163, 223.1. So equals. So this truck really has 717,814 kilometers on it. You know, and that's a lot. You know, and that's why this truck is cheaper. But you know, I did a lot of research online, and I talked to a bunch of guys, and so how can this truck have 7,639 idle hours on it? Well, you know, every time you stop at traffic and you're not driving, you know, it gets idle hours. When the truck is just parked and idling, you know, it gets idle hours. You know, so I was thinking, you know, that's still a lot. You know, how would they get that many idle hours on it? So it must have been this truck was used in the oil field, or used in some kind of commercial setting where it had to be sitting and idling a lot. Like on a site, they have ambulances, like emergency transport back into town if somebody gets hurt. And a lot of times those trucks have to stay running all year around, because if minus 30 outside, you know, you don't want the truck to not start or have an issue. So the truck has to be idling and ready to go all year around. There's supervisors on site. They gotta, you know, drive around with their truck, and then they just sit in the truck all day. Or they drive from one site and then sit in the truck, go to another site, sit in the truck, and the truck is just idling all day long. So there's a few scenarios where a truck would rack up that amount of hours. So if a truck is being used commercially, chances are they have a shop handling the maintenance for the truck, and it's pretty well serviced. I was talking to a lot of guys, and they say, well, there's some guys here on site, their truck has 20,000 idle hours on it, you know, and they're still running perfectly, and the guys are, you know, just happy with the trucks. And I was like, that's a lot, you know, still like 7,000 hours, that's a lot of idle hours, you know. But as long as you know, they're keeping up with the service, you know, the trucks seem to be fine. Emissions deleted, of course, you can't have the DPF on there. Yeah, if you have the emissions on there, that's going to be totally garbage by then. It's just going to be costing you lots of money just with emissions related stuff. So this truck has been deleted. Has been reprogrammed so the EGR doesn't come on. And I think the EGR is welded shut, like it's got the caps on the end. He just welded the inside with a plate and then bolted it back on. So the emissions were good on this truck, so I knew I wasn't going to have a problem with the emissions. The the other thing that goes in these is the turbo actuator. And when I was first looking at this truck to buy it, it had an engine light on, and that's what it was. It was the actuator for the turbo. And that's understandable. With that amount of idle hours, the turbo is going to be all gunked up with soot, and it's not going to be actuating very easily. So of course the actuator is going to be burned out. And that was really all that was wrong with the truck, was the actuator for the turbo. I mean, it just, you know, actuates the vanes on the turbo. Just, you know, it just has that little potentiometer that turns, and then they tend to go weak. So I looked at the service records for this truck, and the maintenance was, you know, right up to date. Everything was right up to date. The factory oil change intervals on this truck were something that took me a while to get over. Like, holy crap, you know, 25,000 kilometers before you change the oil in it. Like, holy smokes. But I started driving this truck for a bit, and then 4,000 kilometers later, you look at the oil and it's still not dirty. You're like, how is that not dirty? This is a diesel. You know, usually the oil is just black. You can't see through it. You know, you put some on your finger and you can't see your finger anymore. You know, but this oil looked like it came out of a gas engine. It's very easy on the oil, and it doesn't seem to drop a lot of soot in there. So all the maintenance was done up on this truck all the way through, right up until when I went and bought it. Another thing I was worried about too is a lot of guys are using the Alpha OBD to like retune their trucks or turn on features or turn off features. And one of the things you can do with that is you can also turn back your mileage on it. So I was worried that somebody had leased this truck, because that's the previous owner had leased this truck. This truck was a lease return. So I think the leasing company had probably had a restriction on how many kilometers, but they didn't have a restriction on how many idle hours you know, the truck could have on it. So they stayed below 160,000 kilometers, but the idle hours are way up there. So I was thinking that maybe they just used the truck like crazy, you know, put 600,000 K on it, and then they turned back the mileage on it. But then I went and looked underneath the truck, and all the paint is still on it. You know, I checked the front diff, checked the rear diff, everything's all tight, all the U-joints are still good. It needed one ball joint, but the other side was still good. Oh yeah, ball joint and turbo actuator, that's the two things it needed. And other than that, you know, the truck seemed like brand new still. It seemed like a new truck with a bunch of dents and dings here and there in it. So all evidence pointed towards that nobody turned the odometer back on it. So I went ahead and bought the truck. It was a deal, and I really needed the truck. And so far it's running great. You know, and there's no ticking. It idles up great. It tows great. Everything works on it. You know, the interior's not destroyed. I kind of getting it destroyed and dirty with all the greasy sand off my gloves, but yeah, it's a great truck so far. There's a crack in the dash here. I literally watched that happen. I was just sitting here. It was minus 25, and I came back into the truck, and I'm just sitting here, and I saw the crack just slowly appear by itself. So I don't know, maybe it can change out the plastic in that when I get time. So I've been driving the truck. I've been running additive through it. A lot of the fuels that are out there, they have the biodiesel blend, and that really gunks up your injectors. It deposits in the injector, you know, and it just eventually the injector just sticks, and then it, you know, burns out. So I've been running AMSOIL has a really good one for getting rid of those deposits. Was it Power Diesel, House? There's a lot of good additives out there that help get rid of those deposits and remove a lot of that gunk. Because if a truck was idling for a long amount of time, then you know, it's not getting hot enough to burn all that stuff off. So I've been pulling pretty heavy with it, and running lots of additives through it, and it just livened right up. You know, the The exhaust brake works great on it now. The turbo works great on it now. When I first got the truck, it was like slow to engage. The exhaust brake wouldn't always come on immediately, and now it's just, you know, as soon as you hit the button, it's working good. It comes on when it's supposed to. Yeah, and it's been a great truck so far. And I want to show where is it now? So I wanted to show oil pressure. So it's in metric here. I'll take it off metric. So there you go. So at idle, well, high idle, I'll take it off high idle. So at idle, it's 31 psi. While towing and just driving around, the truck hardly ever gets above 2,000 RPM. So we go to 2,000 RPM and I got 52 psi for oil. You know, and then at highway speed, I'm at 1,500 RPM, and then we're still at 51 psi. The bypass pressure for the oil pump is like 50 psi. So when it gets to a certain pressure, it starts bypassing the pressure at around 50 psi. I think it's 50 psi. It could be 55, 50, 55 psi. So it's never going to go higher than that. You know, maybe you get a little bit higher. Yeah, 53 psi at 55. So psi is never going to go higher than 55. So at rest, we got 31 psi. And if you let this truck sit for an extended period of time, it's going to go into high idle all by itself. You know, and it high idles at 1,000 RPM. So, and there the truck will idle up. So it high idles at 41 psi. So that's pretty good oil pressure, idling or not. You know, a lot of cars, they don't even have 41 psi of oil pressure. So high idle, 41 psi of oil pressure. That's like what a lot of vehicles have driving down the road, is 41 psi. I'm not too worried about this truck idling for a long period. So my determination was the engine was still in really good shape in this truck, and it has lots of life left in it. The second part of my thoughts were, is this truck good or not, is the transmission. So I did some research on the ACEN transmissions, and they seem to be a very good transmission, you know. And with that, you know, my thinking is this generation of 6.7 Cummins is probably some of the better generation of Cummins, just because of that transmission. It's the first generation of Cummins where they have a reliable transmission that's not going to go out on it. So yeah, the research I did on the transmissions is that they're solid. They're not going to let the truck down. You know, there's a lot of them out there with like 600,000 miles on it with still the same transmission. The transmissions are good and they can handle a lot. So and that's the same torque converter. So without torque converters going. So if looking at it with torque converters and transmissions separately. So after researching the transmissions and determining that the transmissions were excellent, the engine can handle a high amount of idle hours, I went ahead and bought the truck. I am going to use the additive in the fuel from here on in, because that high pressure fuel pump has seen a lot of fuel go through it. It's a CP3 pump. It's not the CP4 pump. CP4 pump is garbage. Those came out in 2019 and then I think to 2021, and then they went back to the CP3 pump just because you know, they're not as reliable, and they when they go, they put aluminum through your injectors and wipe out the whole fuel system. So this truck has a CP3 pump in it, which is very reliable, lasts a long time, but I'm still going to use additive with it. It's winter now, so I got Rotella T6 in the truck. As soon as it gets a little bit hotter, I'm going to put T4 in it, and I may preemptively replace the water pump in it, I didn't do any research on that to see when guys have to change the water pumps, but that has bearings in it that's constantly spinning. I am going to change out the power steering fluid. I'll suck the fluid out of there and put some new stuff in, just to keep that working well. That's another thing too. Minus 30, this truck starts right up. You know, no hesitation. It's minus 30, so it runs a little bit rough, but it's not smoking. It's not doing all the normal things that a truck does when it's you know, has low compression and you're trying to get it started. You know, when you rev it up, you know, there's not a whole terrible amount of smoke coming out of it. It has near to no blow by. You know, no blow by. You know, look at that oil. That oil has 5,000 kilometers on it. You know, since when have you seen oil out of a diesel that was that clean? I've owned Power Strokes, I've owned Detroit diesels, I've owned Mercedes, and I've never had a diesel engine that you can put 4,000 kilometers on it and the oil is still just as clean as the day you put in it, maybe just a little bit dirty. There have been guys that couldn't believe the oil change intervals in these trucks. I don't believe it either. I'm very scared to let it run the full period without changing the oil. I still probably going to change it every 10,000 kilometers. But there's guys that felt like I do, and then they let it run to the full interval and then get the oil tested, and they find out that you know, from shear force the oils break down and they lose their lubricity, and you know, they're not as lubricating as they were like when you first poured it in the car and all that other stuff. You know, you can filter the particles out of the oil, but sometimes the oil just breaks down. And so they took it in and they got it tested and found out that the oil was still good at the end of the interval. You know, this engine is very light, very easy on its oil. You know, it doesn't wear the oil out, you know. So unlike like a two-stroke Detroit diesel where, you know, you got to run 30 weight in it, and then you know, when you go to drain the oil out, it drains out like water and it's not even slippery anymore, you know. But these Cummins 6.7s are very easy on the oil, so that's why they have that length of service interval. I don't know about the transmissions. As soon as I get a chance, I'm going to change the transmission oil in here, because I don't know when it was last changed, and it might need a change coming pretty soon. It still looks good, but I'd really like to get a change for peace of mind, and then I'll start my own record keeping from that point on. But yeah, that's a little bit of info about high engine hours, a little bit of info about these Cummins engines, if that helps anyone out in making a decision and maybe getting a deal on a truck, or not passing up a good opportunity for a truck that might be still in good order. Yeah, and so there's one more thing too, is if the truck does have a tick on it, so if there is a bit of a tick on the truck, most likely it's just a valve lash adjustment, and you can do that yourself. There's lots of videos online about that. I don't know, I'd be a little bit worried about a tick, but more than likely it's just a valve lash adjustment, that it didn't get adjusted quite tight enough at the factory. I don't know. I haven't owned a Cummins 6.7 long enough to know when they start ticking, or if it does tick, or the reasons for it to tick. But it's probably just it wasn't adjusted tight enough at the factory, or maybe somebody ran some crappy oil through it at one time and it wore in. I don't know, but yeah, if you do have a top end tick, most likely it's just a valve lash adjustment. You can do it in an hour or two yourself, you know. My thoughts are you shouldn't be afraid of a 6.7 liter Cummins with high idle hours, because chances are it's still in really good shape. As long as the guy who had it previous did all his maintenance, it should be a good truck still. So I've been driving this truck for a little while now, and it drives like a new truck, starts like a new truck. It doesn't smoke, doesn't make any funny noises. Everything works great. I'm going to take it into the shop and do a good service on it as soon as I get a chance. It's an excellent truck, and I got a really good deal on it. If I had passed up buying this truck, I would probably be paying an extra $10,000-$20,000 more for the same truck. So it was a really good deal, and I'm happy with my decision to go with this truck. These Cummins 6.7 liters are a great engine. I think 2018 is probably the best truck you're gonna get. 2019s and on, they seem to be crapping out a little bit early. One more thing that can possibly give you trouble. So if you look right, hopefully you can see it, the sun's kind of bright, but if you look right on the side of your high pressure pump, that sensor right there, that sensor is your fuel pressure sensor. So if that sensor goes, your truck will die. You try to start it, it won't restart, because if it's not reading any fuel rail pressure, it's not going to open the injectors. So if you have a high amount of hours on the engine, that might be one of the things you want to replace, because when that goes, it'll just like all of a sudden it just not give you a reading, and then the truck will just die and it won't start. And then they got whoever's trying to fix it will say, oh, you got to replace your high pressure pump, and most likely, so they'll try to charge you for a high pressure pump when really it's just that sensor. And the sensors aren't that much. I think they're like under $100. So just change that sensor out, and should be good to go on that end. Yeah, and that's about all I got. Great engines, great trucks. That's my conclusion.